Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Thank you so much for being here with us this week and for tuning in. I have a very special guest that I've had the opportunity to talk to a few times before our recording today, so I know quite a bit about her story. I have with me today Becky Kluke, who is a hairstylist and she is a personal fitness trainer. She lost her 25-year-old son, Skyler, a year ago, February, and she has agreed to come on and share her story and her grieving process and where she is today. So, Becky, thank you so much for coming on. I know this is not going to be an easy conversation, and I just really appreciate you having the courage to be here with me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, why don't you just begin with talking to us about your beautiful son and who he was? Bring him alive for us.
Skyler was beautiful. He was so beautiful, inside and out, full of life, so many dreams. He just wanted to do so many things and such a fighter. He would have fought to do all of those things. And he had so many interests. And his father was like his best friend. And they would go up north and go snowmobiling and four-wheeling and fishing, and they would go out on his boat in the summer, and they just were very, very close. And Skyler and I loved to go hiking, and he loved being in nature and exercising and taking photos, and very, very talented, creative, so smart. He had a lot of friends.
Do you have a picture of him that you could show us?
I do. See if I can get it.
Oh, look at him. He is so adorable. So anybody listening on audio, just a reminder that this is available on YouTube as well. So tell us about your son. I know, as I said earlier when I started, that you and I have had numerous conversations. And so I know his story. So can you talk to us about some of those early indications that, I know that your son struggled and did some self-medicating. So maybe we could leap into that part of his story that led to his death.
Mm-hmm. He had really high anxiety right from a very young age, along with ADD, we found out, and some OCD stuff. And we had him in some counseling and occupational therapy, and he struggled behaviorally at school, at daycare, preschool. And, we struggled to try and find what was going on with him. And of course, doctors wanted to put him on medication, and we did try some medication. We just wanted him to be happy, and he had a hard time focusing, of course, in school. And so as that continued on, he became a teenager and he started to self-medicate, I think, first with pot, and it escalated from there. When he was around 15, it started to get more into like prescription drugs. Xanax was his drug of choice pretty much for the next 10 years. He did do other things, but that was his go-to.
And was that prescribed by a doctor, or was that something where he was buying the drug off the street?
Yes, street drug, yes.
And Xanax, as we know, right? I mean, he was taking that to help with his anxiety.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. When he was a little kid, he'd come home from school and he'd have chewed holes all through his shirt. I mean, that's how bad his anxiety was. And during that time, when he was about 6 years old, his father and I got divorced, and it was traumatizing to him. And he said that as an adult in therapy, that, kids, anybody's perception is their reality, whether we think so or not. And his reality was that we were getting divorced. And even though it was amicable and we did everything we could to make it easy on him, he felt like his dad, his best friend, was leaving. And that was really, really difficult. And he acted out after that in ways like self-harming. It was very brief and we got him straight into counseling, but it was scary.
So, what happened in counseling, though, if they were aware of his high anxiety, correct?
Yes.
And so, was he ever prescribed a medication to help him with the anxiety before he went
He
off?
was.
He was. Okay.
He was put on Prozac and he had manic episodes from it, which can happen in kids. And there was a situation that was really bad and we had to take him off of it because he like left the house at 8 o'clock at night without telling me. And he was maybe 8 years old. He was young. He might've been younger than 8, but I had a neighbor call me and say he was on the bridge down the street. And I was like, oh my gosh, because, so we got him off of that. And so we tried different things. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, right, there is no magic. There truly is no magic pill, right? And it's always hit or miss. And then you've got kids and they're growing and they're changing and they've got all of these other things that are going on. So you're constantly always having to, and always tweaking the medication as well. All right. So now we've got him. He's an adolescent. He's starting to get into some trouble. Did you say behaviorally he's getting into some trouble? And is he not on medication at this point? Did they take him off all meds?
No, I believe he was on Risperidol. And I remember not wanting him on that. I was unaware when he first started using. I only became like really aware when he was 15. And I don't believe he was taking, if he was supposed to be taking medication, I don't think he was. I think he had switched over to, pot and Xanax mostly.
Okay. So lead us down that road of what happened with Skyler.
Yeah. So yeah, he started using Xanax. And like, because I looked in his phone, I found out that he was trying to get pretty much any kind of pill. And of course, we continued to have him go see a counselor and talk to a counselor about this and the school and us. I mean, it was very involved, his father, everybody. And it just escalated. Like I'd search his backpack and do all this stuff. And he started to look different and get in trouble at school. I mean, it got to the point where he was getting, suspended and because he had pot in his bag and I would go and pick him up and one day I picked him up and he looked like he was dying and he looked white and I started crying and he was using a lot worse than I thought he was with friends. And I think it was worse than I even thought, but I was scared to death. He looked like he was dying. And shortly after that, at the end of his junior year, he was kicked out of school.
And was that because he had too many suspensions at that point?
Well, no, he didn't have a lot of suspensions, but I think that they had just had it. And my sister's wife helped me advocate for him because I was like, he needs to be in school. We have to keep him in school. He's so smart. He had just this immense potential. And I just was like, he has to continue with school. And, we went and we presented a case and we, did everything we could and they would not take him back. So after that, I had him stuck to me like glue. I wouldn't let him out of my sight. I'd get him up at 4 a.m. to go to swim class with me. And then I'd drop him off with his dad at his dad's work. And, you can only sustain that for so long. He was 17 years old. And I believe I caught him doing stuff. And I basically said, if you're not going to go to school and you're just going to do drugs, you're not going to get a job. You're living here with me. I can't babysit you 24/7. I need you to be in a residential facility. I need you to get help. And it was a volunteer thing. So he had to go voluntarily. And so I talked to his father because I was prepared to say, you can't live here. You can't live here. If you don't get treatment, you can't live here. And his father needed to say the same thing or else it wasn't gonna happen. And his father did say, we were kind of, I don't know if we would have done it, but we took the chance that he would believe us. And he did.
And he did. Yeah.
Yeah. At the time, I wasn't like, oh, my child has substance use disorder and can't be like, I was still kind of in la la land in a way, like he's going to get better. All I need to do is get him into this facility and he's going to be bright as rain.
But I want to say one thing, because, that feels like just, sort of beating yourself up in terms of being in la la land. First of all, I think that you and your ex-husband were very aware, and that you could have kicked your son out when he got kicked out of school. But the two of you got on the same page, which is hard enough, right? This co-parenting is hard enough, but now you're really trying to say, okay, we have to be on the same page because we are trying to save our son here, right? Mm-hmm. So the two of you handled it so beautifully that you kept your eye on what was most important. And this is, we've got to be a unified front to get our son into treatment. So that to me is not la la land. That to me is like, you two were on it. You knew that it was critical. And why wouldn't you have hope that he has agreed to go to treatment? I mean, that's a huge step. And that's testament to your son too, who had the courage, because he also could have said, your son could have hit the street.
He could have. He was so attached to his father and myself. We were positive he was not going to be like, okay, bye. Where are you going to go? We didn't believe he would do that. I was taking that chance. I was betting on that we were going to get what we wanted. And so he went, and I just went, and I thought, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be great. He's going to be good. He's going to get help, and he's going to go on, and he's going to do all these amazing things that I know he can do. And then he got kicked out like 3 times. I begged and begged them to take him back. And it was just stuff like, he didn't even smoke cigarettes, but he started smoking there. There were a bunch of teenagers there. And so he started smoking, and, he's always breaking the rules. So he'd be out, smoking, and he just didn't like to follow rules, so he got kicked out, and I got him back in at least once, if not twice. I think twice. And when he did finally get kicked out of there for good, oh boy, what did we do? He was with me until it did get out of control, where he was aggressive to me. And I was like, not in my house. It's not going to happen. So he went and stayed with his dad, which only lasted a while too, because my ex-husband doesn't have a daughter, but his partner does, and they're raising her. And she's only 2 years younger than Skyler, and they were super close. But like, she came home one day and found Skyler passed out on the floor. She couldn't wake him up. And that was really tough. So he ended up not being able to stay there. And so he had to stay in his dad's like trailer that he hauls a snowmobile in on the lot of his work. And that was probably when it got the worst. Like, I've never seen him so bad in my entire life.
And you were terrified, right? I mean, I think this is a very important part of the journey, because we know how that plays out on the latter half of this, right? Like, and so I think that this part, like, you and Chris were doing everything that you could to save your child's life. And now you both were like, you don't know what to do next, right? Where a lot of parents end up in this place, because you've got a 17, 18-year-old at this point. Yeah. And so now he's staying in this trailer. And I'm sure that your worry was 24/7 about your son. So it got really bad. And then what happened?
And then I basically begged him to go to an adult
treatment facility.
Yeah, treatment facility. And to be honest, I'm not sure, because he may have gone to jail briefly. He did go to jail off and on for like little drug related offenses. And I don't mean to say little, because it's not little, but he at this point was full blown into addiction. and would have done anything to get his drugs. So I think he did go to jail for a little bit. When he got out, I had called this facility and I wanted him to go, and I did everything but beg. I probably did beg for him to go. I know I chased him down a street. He wasn't going to go, and I ran after him. I pulled up on a curb, jumped out of my car, and ran down the street after him. But he agreed to go, and he did go. He didn't finish it. He didn't finish the program.
Was it a 30-day?
No, it was a 6-month.
6 months. Okay.
It was yes, it was a 6-month program. He had a girlfriend, and then he just left with her one day. Like, he just, young, he's impulsive, and he did that. And then he ended up in jail again. And then fast forward to, so it kind of went like that. And then this last time, 2019, he overdosed 3 times with drugs laced with fentanyl in a week and ended up in the hospital. And like, he was over it. He was done. He just didn't know how to dig himself out of this. And we got him into a detox, which would allow him to go to the facility afterwards. In fact, it wasn't even me. He belonged to, I don't know if you know Maine Works with Margot Walsh. He was part of that work program after being released from jail. And that is such a wonderful, wonderful organization. And she actually pulled strings to get him in there because she loves him so much. And he is super charming, and he's so lucky because people love him and they have stuck their neck out for him. And anyway, he did get into this facility. So here he is there in 2019. He was there for all of COVID, or, the biggest chunk of COVID. And he was in recovery. And I was like, he seemed really, really, he wanted it. He wanted to go finish it. He wanted to get a job. He wanted to go to school. He wanted to help people. He was always 10 steps ahead of himself, though. I'm going to help people with addiction. When I'm like, let's first help you. And I think that would be fantastic. So yeah, he had a whole bunch of,
and he had been sober. He was sober for over a year, right?
Over a year, yeah. He did have a relapse. It was after he graduated from the program. The program was 9 months long,
Wow.
But because of COVID, he had to stay longer. He was able to go get a job because you have to finish the program and then you can get a job, but you're still on the property. And there are 3 other sober living houses on the property, along with the big main house with all the guys.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, and during COVID, he still relies on seeing us all the time, his father and I, and my parents. He's very close to my parents, his grandparents. And during COVID, he couldn't see us. He couldn't see my parents. And it was super hard for him. And he felt isolated, and it was hard. And he still made it through, and eventually was able to move into the sober living home. And he had his job. He had a summer job managing a candy store, and he loved that. And, things were going good. And February 2nd in 2021, I talked to him. I called him, and I talked to him regularly, but he was really happy and was going into the sober living house. And he was really looking forward to summer and going back to his summer job. So he was really upbeat, which for Skyler is sometimes he's not very upbeat, but he was really looking forward to the future.
And I have to just state the obvious, that here you were finally
breathing. I was breathing. I had more hope than I had had in a long time. And, things just seemed to be going so good. That day I talked to him, February 2nd. And then February 3rd, I actually sent him a picture of him and myself when he was 14, it had popped up in my memories and I sent it to him and he didn't respond. And that's typical. Sometimes he doesn't respond to me for a day or two. And so the next day, it's the 4th, and his father calls me and is like, have you heard from Skyler? And I said, well, I talked to him 2 days ago. And he said, well, I've been calling him constantly. He's not returning my calls, which is not like him. He always calls his dad back, always, always. And so this had been like a day and a half. And I said, well, maybe he lost his phone because he does do that all the time. And he had gotten back together with his girlfriend. He could have been with her and, it could have been anything, but he was panicking. So I started panicking. And so he said, I'm going to call the police. I want them to go and check his house and call Jamie, who was the director of this facility. So I started to panic and he said he'd call me back. So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of rocking and getting more panicked by the minute. And then I got the call from his dad and he said, we lost our son tonight. And really, that's all I heard. And that whole night was such a blur, but I think I started screaming and my partner, Scott, came running upstairs and took the phone. And I don't even know. The next thing I remember was being downstairs on the couch, and I wasn't sobbing or heaving or any of that. It was just pouring out of my eyes. Just tears were just nonstop pouring out of my eyes for hours. I was rocking back and forth saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, like over and over again, because I don't think my body, my mind could handle any of it at that moment. Like I just didn't know what to do.
It's funny because the way that I've described it and the way I talk about it and the moment that I learned about my brother, it's the body is this fascinating machine where we go into shock, because I used to say that I think that if the reality sunk in too fast, that our hearts would stop beating from pure grief. Like we couldn't handle it. And, I remember that I was holding the phone to call my parents, and I felt like I was holding a hand grenade, because I knew that as soon as I told them, their world would blow apart as they've known it. Right.
Yeah.
And I can never read an obituary of a young person dying. I can never do anything anymore without taking a moment and thinking about how that family's life has changed in every way. I could just start crying right now talking about it in every way possible. Right. And so this moment here, you'd been waiting for this call, right? When your son was actively using.
Right.
Now you've got your son in recovery, going into sober living. And it was the very last thing on your worry list is that something had happened to your son. Yeah. So the shock feels almost like it was, I don't know how to describe it. I can only imagine what it could feel like for you, because you'd waited for that phone call before. Right. And now when you're finally
yeah. Every time my ex-husband would call me, I'd be like a gripped in fear, fight or flight. I would freak out because his father and I are friends and we get along. But whenever Chris would call, it would always be bad news. Like, oh, Skyler got arrested, or, Skyler crashed a car, it, not necessarily that, but it was always something. So when I saw Chris come up on my phone thing, it was sheer terror.
Panic. Mm-hmm. So here you are, and you are in shock for a long time, right? I mean, you can't really function for several months.
Well, the next day I had to go see him, it was reality. Like, I'm not sure if I hadn't gone to see him, I'm not sure I would have believed it. I really was so like, how can this be? And we went to see him. And after I broke down, I just kissed him and touched him and stroked his hair, and I just couldn't leave him alone there. I was like, I can't leave him alone. He's alone. He's laying here alone. And a part of me just died there with him.
I know, we just got to take a moment. And so here you are a little over a year. And I think that's important for people to know, because during those early months, you and I have talked about this. And a lot of people have explained it this way, where you don't want to live anymore, but you don't want to take your life. So it's this limbo where you really just feel that you're existing and not very well, right? Like you're not even really existing. You're breathing, you're eating, you're doing the things. And I think that one of the most profound images that you shared with me before we started recording during your grieving process was the way that you would sleep with his ashes. Yeah. And I bring that up not to be morbid, but because I feel like when you explained to me sleeping with his ashes and where you are now, it's those tiny guideposts to let us know that we're making some sort of progress to rejoin the living. So can you talk to us about your grieving process, Becky?
Yeah. So after we did not have a funeral, it was COVID, and his father and I just could not handle, even if we could have had a funeral, we could not handle it. So we both got his ashes in beautiful Maine wood boxes. And I, at that point, and right in the beginning, I was spending all my time in my bedroom, not in bed and sleeping, but I was in my room, in my chair. And I had his ashes in my lap all the time. And I just cried and cried. And I would go to bed with them right next to me in the bed for months and months. And I would be dressed head to toe in my son's clothes. Saying it out loud makes me sound a little crazy, but
very normal, very normal.
And I'm 18 months in and I'm still wearing his socks. So, but that's it. But I had on his clothes every single day, and I had his ashes like either on me, next to me all the time. And I would just talk to him and cry. And I'd go to bed at night and talk to him and say I was sorry for just everything, because that's guilt. And I felt, after he died, I felt so many things more clearly than I did before he died. And we can maybe get into that after, but.
No, talk to us about that. I think that this is important because it's like one of my guests, Deborah Hanlon, who is the medium, and talked about how when somebody dies, it really awakens the dead parts of us. It brings up all the things that we can't ignore anymore. Or if we do, it catches up to us eventually. I want you to talk about the clarity that you gained, and also this guilt, this incredible guilt that you felt too, because I think that guilt can really add such deep complexity to our grieving, but it is such an important piece that can lead to transformation or can lead to very deep depression, anger, etc. And so, because I feel like what makes your story so powerful is you really allowed yourself to sit in your deep grief and really look at that dark, dark stuff, which is such an important part, I think, of being able, as you put it, I love the way you talk about this, is rebuilding your life around this deep grief. You are never, ever going to, I use the term heal from losing your son. That loss is going to be with you for the rest of your life. But it does not mean that you cannot experience joy in a full life around that grief. And you talk about it so eloquently. So let's go to what you saw very clearly, and then the guilt aspect and the things that really have helped you in this process.
So before Skyler died, I was always hate to say the word lecture. I mean, I was always just trying to get him to stop, he wanted it too. He was fighting for sobriety. He wanted it so badly. And, because he had used drugs from such a young age, his maturity was stunted, and he would say these things like he just did not have the maturity, the reasoning of a 23, 4, 5-year-old man. So it got frustrating. And I would always be like, how can you do this to us? How can you hurt us like this? How can you hurt someone? Guilting him, really. But it was pure desperation. And I took it personally. Like, I was angry at times. Like, you have hurt me for 10 years. Like, I probably lost years of my life because I have been traumatized. And I just couldn't understand it. And then he died. And it was like, bam, so clear that I just didn't see it before. But as soon as he died, I was like, this is not about me. It was never about me. He never wanted to hurt me. He couldn't help it. He couldn't help it. And then he was living with guilt for hurting me and hurting his dad. And I feel so guilty that I feel like I know that I added to that guilt, which doesn't make addiction any easier. And I don't know why I didn't have that clarity before. So I would every single night talk to him. I still talk to him, but it's not as,
When we're in the thick of something, we can't have clarity because we're in it, right? We gain clarity in hindsight.
Yeah.
It's like the Monday morning quarterback. It's easy to see what we could have done differently when it's past, but when we're in it, we're doing the very best we can. You and Chris were doing the very best that you could. You weren't trying to guilt your son. You were trying to do anything you possibly could to save his life.
In that emotional state around someone you love that much, it's hard to be clear.
Right. And so, of course, it's personal. This is your son. You're at your wit's end, and you don't know what else to do. So I'm saying that to you, and I'm saying that to listeners, that it's easy to beat ourselves up after we've lived. You guys were both doing the absolute best you could to save your son. And that's it.
I feel like I was always in fight or flight with him. Even when he was in recovery and we'd go visit him and I could breathe, I still had that. It's like this trauma that doesn't go away. And I, would kind of try to get him to say what I wanted to hear. And I wasn't present. I was just constantly trying to have reassurance that he was going to be okay. I needed him to reassure me that he was going to be okay. And by doing that over and over again, I'd go see him. It would just cause strife between us because he got sick of it and I couldn't help myself. So I wasn't enjoying him. I wasn't enjoying those moments that I could have enjoyed. And that, is a huge amount of regret and grief around that.
I want to backtrack for 2 seconds because I don't think we told listeners how your son died.
Oh, we didn't.
I don't think that we did. And so just for listeners, that he ended up taking what you think was a Xanax that was laced with fentanyl. And I say that because we've got kids dying and adults dying from drugs laced with fentanyls because your son was not trying to die.
No, not at all. And I believe, because I read text messages, we know that he died from acute fentanyl poisoning, period. But we believe that he had bought Xanax and it was laced with the fentanyl.
I can't say it enough. I want everybody to hear, if young people are listening, you think that you can even buy pot now on the street. And now we know that people are dying from pot being laced with fentanyl. Nothing is safe. I just want our young people and adults to hear this too, because
anything that does not have a prescription, and it can be, I even believe it can be topical. It can be anything. and he bought a street Xanax, like a Xanax bar, and your kid could go to a party and smoke a joint. He doesn't have to be, or she doesn't have to have substance use disorder to die at a party from fentanyl one time.
Yep.
One hit a pot, one pill.
I actually just read an article that there were these two young kids, exact same thing, 21 and 23. They took a gummy bear. They took a pot gummy bear and both ended up in the hospital and one died. So I've got chills talking about it. We can't talk about it enough because it's becoming a horrible epidemic. Okay. So circling back to your guilt around your son and feeling as though you weren't present, I cannot take away your guilt, but I'm going to say what I said earlier, that you were doing everything that you possibly could to save your son's life. And when any of us have experienced a traumatic event, I always say that you start at a 7, like let's say at baseline, we're at a 0 and something horrible happens and we go to a 10, that once we've experienced repeated trauma, now you as a mom, you're already at a 7. So it doesn't take much to get to a 10. So of course you're terrified all the time. You want to believe that your son is going to be sober and live this amazing life. But there's this underlying fear constantly, what if, and ultimately the what if happened and your son ended up dying.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that to you as much as I'm saying that to all the listeners. Guilt, I understand it. If anyone's read my book, they know that how much guilt I carried. It took a lot to work through it, but that guilt really does not serve us in any way. And I know that it's easy to say that, but to truly let the guilt go, we have to reconcile with ourselves. We have to accept our humanness, and we've got to give ourselves the grace to grieve and to forgive the person who has passed and to forgive ourselves and our humanness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Because your story is so powerful, Becky, and because you've done so much work, can you talk to us? It's been a year. You are still deeply grieving your son, but you've also made this tremendous progress from sleeping with your son's ashes to now you are working out again, and you experience joy. So can you talk to us about the things that have helped you the most to move through something that you actually never thought you would be able to survive?
Yeah, I didn't think they were in the beginning. I didn't know if I wanted to survive. I was pretty sure I didn't. I mean, I would not have taken my life, but it was just such a darkness. Like I was in the deepest, darkest hole. And that was when I slept with the ashes and when I lived in his clothes and cried constantly. And, there's no definitive point where I said, oh, I'm not going to sleep with my son's ashes anymore. I think it slowly, like I would less and less have him in my lap. I think actually one night I knocked my hand so hard against his ashes box that I cut my hand. And because it was so close to me and I moved, and I remember thinking, maybe he doesn't have to be right here. And so I moved him to the end of the bed on a chest. And so it started there, and I would just go over to the chest, sit down, hold on to the box, cry, and put it back. And really, I think, and we're talking, that was months before I even got to that point. I think I just started to take things. I think I always took things minute to minute, even back then, minute to minute, sometimes second to second, and feeling to feeling, thought to thought, and made those decisions as I came across them. And then if I wanted to go back, I could go get it. And, I think I just felt like I wanted to move forward for Skyler. And I have said this to you before. that he used to say to his dad and I all the time, I just want you and my dad to be proud of me. That was one of the biggest things he said over and over again. He wrote it on Facebook. It was like a big thing. Like whenever he was in recovery, or he'd be like, I want to make you too proud. And, and now my motto's kind of been, I want to honor you, Skyler, and I want to make you proud of me. And I kind of live each day thinking that way.
I love that. That is just it's so, honestly, that's exactly how I felt too with my brother, that I believe, and I know that you and I both share this belief because we've talked about that we believe the spirit lives on. I know not everybody holds that belief, but I know that we do.
I asked him to be here today, and I believe that he is.
Yeah, same. I share that belief as well. And so I know that helps. So I know that our belief around that they live on and that they're with us has really helped. Of course, that does not take the place of them being here physically or accelerate our, that grieving process that is so important. But can you talk to us about some other really tangible things that have helped you during this past year?
Oh, well, I have amazing friends that have been unbelievably supportive in all the right ways. And my family and my sister has called me, or mostly texted me actually, like every other day, just letting me know that she loves me and that she's thinking of me and that she's there. I need to talk to her, which is very helpful. And it feels good and it's not pressure, and that's a big thing. My partner, Scott, kept me alive. He fed me. He, like, literally, I don't know where I would be right now if it was not for him. So I've had really good support. And honestly, I feel like throughout my life, I've had some pretty big traumas. And I think that I'm stronger for that. And I've been able to do what I never thought possible. I used to tell Skyler, you can't die. You can't die because I won't be able to live. I won't be able to make it. And I believed that 100%. And I am here and I am moving forward. And I hope I'm moving forward with Skyler. I believe I'm moving forward with Skyler. And someone once said, actually, Margot from Mainworks said, Skyler was otherworldly, not meant for this world. He's too special for this world. He's off doing what he needs to do.
Yeah, because I do believe that once we leave this physical realm, that we've got a job on the other side. And a couple more things before I have you share your channel, because I know people are going to want to reach out to you. I have a couple of questions. One is, whenever I say I have a deep belief that the universe has to balance us out, that when something horrific happens, something good has to happen too. And I think it is very difficult for us to see anything good when we are in the depths of our grief, or to see anything good that has come from some life-altering tragedy that changes the course of our life forever. Can you share one thing, no matter how small, that has come out of Skyler's death that has changed you for the better? Or some sort of transformation, or something that you've learned about yourself that you didn't know? I know what you just said was huge, that you're stronger than you ever thought you were. So anything else you want to share with our listeners that has come from his death?
I find that I'm more present with people. And I know this from recently having, I do hair in an assisted living facility, and I have these two older people who love each other, and they have been separated, and just, not any big reason, but when I'm there, I make sure I get them together because it makes them so happy. And so when I bring this woman down to see him, and they light right up, and this happened a week or two ago, and it happened today actually, but I see them light up and I just start crying. And before, I'm not sure I would have done that, but being very present in that moment, which I think I was just kind of, going about this life really sometimes vacant, not paying attention. And what I learned from Skyler's death is that because I can't do it now, I can't take it back. I can't be more present with him, that I want to be more available, more present for the people that I love and the people in my life that I care about.
God, that is so beautiful. And the image of these elderly people, right, who are on different units within this facility. And gosh, it makes me want to cry, because what I envisioned when you brought them together and it moved you to tears.
You have no idea. It's just, I do it every day that I'm there because, I do it for them, but I really do it for me because it brings me just so much joy. I cry.
That was the image I had, that when you talk about being present, that you are experiencing it on all levels, right? You're seeing it, all senses. That's what I meant. And you're feeling the absolute beauty of that love in that moment. That's incredible. I feel like that's partly what happened. I think that can be the gift that we can receive from the person who has left us, to understand, to really get that life is actually a true gift. It is not a given. And even though we all know that intellectually, that when a life is taken from us and there is this massive hole in our world, if we allow it, beautiful things can bloom in that space that they leave behind. Not right away. I know that it takes time, but if we really allow the gift of this massive loss to transform us in some way, beauty will grow in that space. It will. It just will, because they've left room for something else to happen. All right. We are literally at the top of the hour, and we didn't get to talk about this, but Becky and I have also had conversations. Tyler Henry, who is this really wonderful medium, and he's on Netflix, and it's Life After Death, the series. If you get a chance, just watch it. He just brings such hope about spirits.
That helped me a lot.
Yeah. And yes, it helps me too. But Becky, please tell people, I know that there are going to be listeners who are going to want to reach out to you. So tell us your Instagram channel, and I know you're on Facebook as well.
Yes, it's just Rebecca Kluke.
Rebecca, not Becky. I've been calling her Becky because she goes by Becky, but her channel is Rebecca Kluke, and we will have that in the show notes. So my last parting question is, what does self-love look like to you now?
It is every day moving my body, or at least trying to move my body, and at least a 20-minute yoga routine. Get on my mat, do some yoga. I always feel so much better after. And 10 minutes of meditation, at least. Either, usually it's sitting in stillness and watching my breath and being aware of my thoughts. Sometimes it's a walk in the woods, a walking meditation. But I would say that right now in this moment, those are the things that I need to do for myself, and shower regularly.
And we laugh because Becky and I have talked about during early grief, taking a shower. It's as hard as climbing Mount Everest on some days. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us and for sharing this really hard story. And I'm hoping that all of our listeners, either if you are grieving or you're supporting somebody who is grieving, really, there's nothing that you can do to take away someone's grief. But what you can do is you can hold space for their grief. You can do nothing but just be present and listen and bring in the light of your being into their dark space. And sometimes that's all we can do, and it's enough. And if you are grieving, to be so gentle with yourself, and to really know in your heart that you will be able to grow your life around that grief and to feel joy again. And so I want to thank you all for being here. And Becky, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.